Hey everyone, it's your boy Matt. It is currently the 14th of April 2026. This is what can be described as a personal update or a taco admin. It's blurring the lines there. Taco admin is where I give instructions for a community driven process art project called Taco. Uh, its process art is, uh, is a form of art where it's actually the we don't know what we get up with. There is no set intention in process art. I sort of nudge it in different directions, but what I'm trying to do is I'm trying to maintain a series of rituals and cultural practices which keep a group of people together. That group of people can then be mobilized for different political purposes, which we have all come together to agree are a good idea in general. And there is a values-based element to Taco. It's a, it's a, and you look at what we do, you decide that you like what we do, and then you stick around and you keep engaging in those rituals. Those rituals are up to you. It's a meme chain. We exist inside memes. What I need you to do is I need you to use your creativity to produce some kind of display based on me or one of or the characters in Taco. The characters in Taco are people who I've mentioned in my videos. They're people who were doxed in my porn account by a man called Fred Sashini. Fred Sashini is ultimately the person that this community-driven process art project was designed to deal with. It's ultimately a form, as strange as it sounds, of information warfare. I'm trained as a social scientist. I currently at the time when this video was released, I was registered as a provisional psychologist. I've been trying to use my body of social theory to coordinate the community to be able to maintain this political movement. Now, one of the things that I have had to do on the side of this, because this is just the responsibility of a person who who is ex-military and who has that skill set, and there's the military community is not so dissimilar to a gang. You don't really get a choice about being in it or not being in it. After you're in it for life, because it's socially enforced by the other people in that community. And I had a responsibility to deal with war crimes committed by the SAS because I have the skills to do it and was in the political situation to do that. One of the things that I'm working on with this is looking at the pipeline to be able to find replacements for people in SAS who are not culturally oriented towards the mission of the institution. So again, what happened is that the SAS were committing war crimes in Iraq and Afghanistan. They killed a lot of people who were civilians. There were processes such as blooding where they would kill a civilian or a prisoner as sort of an act of inoculation to violence. It was really bad, and most famously there was a man called Ben Robert Smith who received the Victoria Cross, which is our highest military honor, who committed several war crimes. And it's been a big cultural shock for us, and we haven't been able to use the SAS for anything until we resolve this problem, because we don't know if they're going to kill people who they're not meant to kill. And the role that they have is one where that kind of ethically grey decision is something that they individually need to make. So the kind of soldiers that we develop need to be very wise, and they need to be a statistical abnormality. They need to both be able to have the skills to complete their mission, which is very difficult. They need to have the personality characteristics to be able to thrive within the environment that we create for them. there's of course big variation in personality, which what will be successful in a role, but they need to be the right personality fit. They need to be more individualistic because we need them to make decisions and individually take on the mission. We can't have people who are sort of just going with the flow or are not or do not think freely. We need to have people who would make the decision to kill a person themselves. And we need them to be mature to do it. Now, the solution that I have suggested is that because Commando, which is our other Special Forces regiment, not Special Forces regiment, Special Forces group, we have two different Commando regiments. We have a first Commando, which is sort of they're part-time. It's almost like a training regiment to my understanding. And then second Commando, which is full-time. They are their own thing. There is not a true equivalent to the Australian Commando Regiment overseas. It is very much an indigenous capability that we have developed in Australia. They're the same way, like you look at an SAS soldier in Australia and an SAS soldier in Britain, they're going to be different SAS, but they're still running the SAS program. Commando is sort of its own thing. It's not the equivalent. It's the most similar thing to it is Green Berets, but they are their own cultural group. And my solution is that we use Commando as a B team, and you go through the B team to get to the A team. There's a downside to this approach, okay? So what I'm looking at is I'm looking at different kinds of interventions for training. Let's not say interventions, different training pipelines across the world. So my background is consultancy and positive behavior support. So what I do is that I study people who are dangerous to themselves or others, and what I do is I figure out how we work with them. And to do this, we have interventions. And some of the interventions we use are copy and pasted interventions, ones that we've used before or someone has come up with. We tend to use a list of rules for human nature called applied behavior analysis. And that gives us a handbook of different strategies that we can use. But it's built on the wider group of professions which share the same kind of skill set to positive behavior support we call consultancy. So you study different industries, you go from industry to industry, studying the people, you see patterns and things like this. So when we're training soldiers, we can look at the training pipeline as sort of like a product. And there's different products around the world. So there's the Navy SEAL program. If you want to have developed soldiers who have the same capabilities as Navy SEALs, you look at their training pipeline, you look at all the things they're doing, and if you wanted to create SEALs, you would copy that training process. There's some variants to which process you'd choose. So for example, in Australia, running a SEAL program, I don't think we'd need it. It's a great program. I'll explain what a SEAL is as a special forces thing in a second. But you look at the training pipeline, and if you want that, you copy that. What you want and what will most effectively work for you is going to be based on indigenous characteristics. So for example, Australia during World War I could produce light horse soldiers. The British can't. An Australian light horse trooper is the result of experience on the land in our farms. We're a very large country. We've got a lot of land, and we had a lot of farmers back during World War I. The Australian Army was able to produce light horsemen who were exceptional soldiers. The British couldn't produce soldiers like that. Other nations can't produce it. That was something that we were able to do because of our culture. Well, I wouldn't say culture, indigenous characteristics. It's Australia. The Americans, they produce SEALs, okay? I'll use the SEAL example in the form to illustrate points for how we bake different kinds of soldier. Okay, so and it's the same process can be applied when we look at any kind of job really. Now, SEALs they came about during the Vietnam War because the American government realized that they're going to have all these operations in these riverine areas, and they need special forces soldiers who are going to be able to fight in those areas. The Navy looked at had something equivalent in Australia to clearance divers. I'm not so full, I don't have a head full of the acronyms for all these different groups. I can't remember what the acronym is for an American clearance diver. But it's this, basically they were like, hey guys, we need to get you guys, except we need to prepare you guys for the work that, for infantry kind of work. We don't need you to be blowing up landmines or doing underwater demolition. We need you to fight in these riverine areas. So they got these people and they put them in that. What they were selecting for through their training process are people who don't quit. They are looking for tenacity. More than anything, they are selecting for that personality characteristic. Okay? So when you start selecting for a particular thing, you end up with a problem. When you start, if you are not as tough or tenacious as a SEAL, because these guys are exceedingly tenacious. They get the way that they get selected is that they just get bastardized on a beach for I don't know how many weeks it is. I think it's 14 or 20 weeks or something. Fuck me, I don't know how long Buds is. But they get tortured at this fucking beach for a while. And what they're looking for is that they're looking for people who are particularly good at, first of all, fighting in that riverine environment, but they're intended more as shock troops. The idea, when they were envisioned as a continuation of underwater demolition. Those guys were originally trained for operations such as D-Day, where they would go out to the beach in front before everyone else arrives and clear the beach of landmines and shit. Okay? They're the first wave. They have to deal with the most violence and the most risk. And because of that, they select for people who can do that specific role and the Americans can do that because they have a very large military, and because of the size of their military, it is possible for them to have these more specific brands of special forces who do these specific kinds of operations. SEAL stands for sea, air, and land. I'm going to let you know it really stands for a helicopter. Going in by helicopter and doing SWAT shit. That's what they're most famous for. They're a mobile, all-terrain SWAT team which originally developed to be able to clear beaches in front of D-Day and fight in riverine environments in Vietnam. Okay? Now, the downside to, if you run a SEAL program, there are some downsides to that kind of intervention. I would say intervention training program. If you are selecting for people to do this specific role and the personality characteristics to fulfill this specific role, you're going to miss out on variance, okay? And you're going to miss out on skills and personality characteristics which would be beneficial to a regiment or community when you start cutting people based through a selection process based on requirements for one specific task. This is why in the Special Forces environment where you have to potentially, where there's just such a large variety of different operations, it makes sense to have a very large variation in kinds of people in your organization. You need to have that variation. Otherwise, you're going to find yourself in a situation where you might have some ochre, incredibly tough person who is capable of storming a beach, but they're not able to train a group of people in a culturally alien area on how to navigate the politics of a specific community which might have an insurgency. Okay? That's a different skill set. And if you're selecting for one thing to fulfill this specific role of storming a beach, you're going to miss out on the characteristics in your organization for people who are doing these other things. That's where there is this necessity for a very wide, more eclectic group of Special Forces operators. And something like a Green Beret regiment makes a lot of sense in that environment, where we have people who speak multiple languages, people who are trained on a larger variety of tasks, and we have not necessarily a larger variety of tasks, where the characteristic for what we decide on who gets in isn't how tough they are, but potentially how smart they are, or how well they're able to work within a team or a team of teams with varied and work cross-culturally. Okay? Now, that's kind of why you don't want to have an insanely high standard, right, for this specific thing. We need people who are capable of being trained in a whole lot of different tasks. And that's what the commando regiment should function as. One of the things I have recommended is that the commando regiment sort of function as a place where we train people within army on good soldiering. And it's a place for personal and career development, and people might spend some time in the commando regiment and then return to regular army. What I kind of envision is having a very, very large C team, keep the size of B team, the commando regiment, to commando the same size it is, and then you have the SAS doing their own thing on the side, okay? And I think we should have, and this is, I'm going to take it back and stop saying I think we should have, because I do not have access to all the information I need to make decisions on these things, and I'm not the person who's obviously making these decisions. I'm a person who's trying to give useful consultancy and trying to solve these problems responsibly. What I recommend doing is having a very large, I think I get the two commando regiments confused. I think it's one commando, right? Have a very large one commando, okay? And you're gonna have to spend some money on this. You can't, there is already money. The way it works is that money is allocated to different purposes. It's going to be already allocated to the Special Operations Group, and whoever the general or brigadier who's in charge of that, whoever's in charge of that is going to have to make decisions based on the existing budget, okay? You can't solve a problem like this with the existing constraints. If you want to have, I would struggle to be able to get it, because they have spent so much time building commando. You're going to have had generations of these very passionate soldiers and officers who have built this thing to a standard. Commando did excellent work in Iraq and Afghanistan. Commando did not commit war crimes. SAS did. If that's the case, we don't want to decrease the operational effectiveness of the commando regiment by putting people in it who are of a lower standard and polluting the ability of that regiment to conduct its mission. I am suggesting that we lower the standards in general to get people into these special forces regiments, and then we train them by putting them through these processes over time, so we both get greater variation in the personalities and the overall ability of these soldiers. I think the 1st or 2nd Commando, the training regiment for Commando, that one becomes the training regiment for all of Army, and that allows us to have more people who can be selected to go on to the B team and to the A team, and it also provides a higher standard of soldier throughout the entirety of Army. That's what the plan is, but you don't get that if you keep the existing training Commando regiment the same size, right? Because otherwise what happens is that we just lower the standards and we don't get an increase in capacity. We get a decrease in capacity for Commando, and we have a longer training pipeline for SAS, okay? You need to have a very large training regiment for Commando, and I just needed to explain that. Right, have a good day everyone.